Hello, welcome to Longshot Larry's Sports Astrology. We're looking at Super Bowl 57, Kansas City Chiefs up against the Philadelphia Eagles. A quick shout out to Venkat for buying us a coffee. We really appreciate your support. The link is in the description if you are interested in doing that. To Clean Music Lover, Sean and Crowcop for their input on the timing of the start of the game. So we're using a time of 4:37. I've looked back over history. It can start anywhere from 4 minutes past to 10, 11 minutes past, so I've gone right in the middle there. So Philadelphia are very slight favourites. I actually thought they would be heavier favourites, but they're only 1.5 points, which isn't much. So they're going to be represented by the Ascendant Leo and the Sun in Aquarius, and that's it. Because the part of fortune is in Aries, so we're going to use Mars to rule the part of fortune. There's no ruler of the 10th. Kansas City are going to be represented by Aquarius, so in the Frawley method Saturn rules Aquarius, and also Libra on the IC, so Venus. So looking at this from the Frawley method, there's only one thing that comes up on this chart here, and is that the Moon will trine Venus, Lord of the Fourth, in 5 degrees. Now in NFL, we only go 4 degrees unless there's extra time, so that's one indication this game may go to extra time if Kansas City are to win. Part of fortune on the MC, Frawley says that it's the position of the antiska of the part of fortune, which is important, so we don't read that as one for the favourite. Now if we do move this game forward 1 minute, you will see that Saturn is now applying to the part of fortune instead of separating. Saturn does rule the 7th, but once again Frawley says that that is not an indication of who's going to win. So looking at the antiska positions on the outside, you can see that the Sun is Lord of the First, representing Philadelphia, is separating from the antiska of the South Node. It's within 1 degree, so that's one for the underdogs, Kansas. The Moon will form a trine to the antiska of Mars, Lord of the part of fortune, in 1 degree, so Philadelphia will probably have the early running. So you've got one each. The Sun conjunct the South Node is probably stronger. If it does go to extra time, the Moon will trine Venus, so that's one for Kansas if it does go to extra time. So aspects in the game, the only major aspect is that the Mars is applying to a sesquiquadrate to Pluto. It's quite wide, 40 minutes. That's indicative of a war of attrition, a real battle in the trenches sort of game. Look at the first game chart here for Philadelphia. You can see Saturn is exactly conjunct the North Node. That's probably a positive for today. The thing I like about Philadelphia is that Jupiter, which usually shows up in winners charts on these big games, is forming a quincunx to the Moon in the first game chart. Now the Moon probably represents the spectator's emotions, so that is quite good. So Philadelphia first game chart looks pretty good. If we look at the Philadelphia coach, Nick Siranni, we had quite an in-depth look at his chart in the previous video. So he's a Gemini with his Sun opposite Neptune and trine Pluto. So Neptune is right in the middle there, forming a T-square. So Neptune, as mentioned previously, is notoriously difficult to interpret. Can be dreams coming true or defeats snapped from the jaws of victory. Really hard to decipher Neptune, but you would have to say that that is probably a negative for Nick Siranni today. He does have the Sun trine his Sun, which is a helpful aspect. However, Saturn is sesquiquadrate his Venus. Now, we would be hoping that Saturn will turn out to be positive today because it's sextile the part of fortune, but usually Venus can represent your emotional state. Looking at the progressions for Nick Siranni, he does have his progressed Sun rising close to the start there, and his progressed Sun is moving into a sextile to his progressed Saturn and Jupiter, which is helpful. Philadelphia will probably start well. Mercury is going to be exactly conjunct his South Node during the game. The node keeps popping up quite a lot in this game, and one thing I forgot to mention is that the nodal axis is square the ascendant at the start, which Clean Music Lover pointed out. Jalen Hurts, the Philadelphia quarterback. Now Uranus is separating from a square to his Sun. We don't know exactly where his Sun is. That would be very handy. And this aspect hasn't seemed to hamper him at all. Mars is applying to a sextile to his Sun. It's 1.5 degrees away, which is quite wide. If it was closer, it would be stronger, but that should strengthen him today. On his progressions, Jupiter up here in Aries is applying to a quincunx to his progress sun, which I quite like. Jupiter-Sun combinations are very handy when you're going into a final. If we look at Kansas City now for their first game, well, Saturn is applying to a square to the moon and a quincunx to Mercury. Mercury rules their Virgo sun, so it would be a symbol of success. Not too flash unless Saturn turns out to be positive because of its sextile to the part of fortune. You will see that the Sun is applying to a trine to Mars, which is quite handy in first game's chart. So Mars is their aggression on the field and their energy levels, and sextile Jupiter. So that's handy for Kansas. However, I will give the advantage to the Philadelphia first game. Looking at Andy Reid, any main aspect I can see today is Mars is separating from a sextile to his Mercury and applying to a trine to his natal Venus, which isn't not a major aspect, slightly helpful. It does have Uranus floating around the ascendant here, square the nodes. Quite sure what that means. Mercury is past a conjunction to his Mars. If you look at Andy Reid's progressions, we do have a time chart here. You can see that his progress sun is up here at 1 Gemini 53, and it's just past a trine to his Mars. Now that's a very nice aspect going into a final, and his sun is sextile Mars natally. He's also got his progressed moon applying to a trine to his sun. So there are a couple of nice aspects. The one thing I didn't mention is that Pluto down here at 29 Capricorn is just past the sextile to his sun, and that's a very nice aspect, but it is separating, so not as strong. A couple of other things for Andy Reid in that the moon is under a trine to his progressed MC during the game. Neptune, however, is square his progress Saturn quite closely, which rules his MC, and the Sun, however, is sextile his progress Saturn. Now, Saturn natally is right in the middle of his Sun and the Moon. Neptune's in that area there. I think he'll probably go okay because he is a double Pisces, but we'll have to wait and see. Now Patrick Mahomes is interesting. Once again, we've got the node popping up. His south node is on the MC at the start. Saturn is trine his node, and the part of fortune is somewhere around there. And also the south node, which is square to ascendant, is conjunct his Mars. That's a big challenge for Mahomes today, I believe. It will sap some of his energy and drive there. Neptune is interesting in his chart as well. It is opposing his Sun, not what you want going into a big game. It's applying about 20 minutes away. His Sun is trine Neptune natally, so he probably will handle that better than you would normally hope, but you really don't want that Neptune opposing your Sun going into a big game. If we bring up the progressions for Patrick Mahomes, you can see his progress sun is moved out of Virgo. It's into Libra here now, 2116. His progress sun is very closely quincunx his natal Saturn up here in Pisces, and his sun is opposite Saturn natally. Quincunxes are all about adjustments, and with his injury that sort of indicates why he's had to adjust his playing style if Kansas are going to win. Venus is also going to be exactly conjunct his Saturn at the end of the game. Conjunctions to Saturn are usually okay. They indicate achievement. Venus and Saturn usually don't bind well together. It's not really something you expect to see when someone's jumping for joy for winning the Super Bowl. So in terms of the quarterbacks, I'd have to give the edge to Jalen Hurts today. Look at some of these mundane charts. I think the solar eclipse from October last year still has some influence. So the solar eclipse at that time was right the early degrees of Scorpio, and you can see for Nick Siranni it was pretty good. It's trine his Mercury applying, which rules his Gemini Sun. It's good. He also had Mars close to his Sun, trine the ascendant, and this eclipse is set for Philadelphia. The lunar eclipse on 8th of November. Now this is very old now. It's 3 months old. Does it still have some influence? I think it's waned dramatically after Sabalenka won the Australian Open tennis recently in the women's. This eclipse was opposite Uranus, square Saturn. You can see it's at the time in Philadelphia it was square the MC, which is pretty nasty. Jalen Hurts is a Leo. His Sun was conjunct the MC at the time of this eclipse. Eagles fans would be hoping it's far enough away. It hasn't really impacted him to date so far. He did have an injury December, I believe, right at the end of the regular season. But this is probably the main reason I thought Philadelphia would struggle win the Super Bowl in my previous video. But it's 3 months away, and it's probably, its influence is quite weak now. However, during the Super Bowl, the moon starts at 15.5 Scorpio, so it's going to be going right over that eclipse degree opposite to Uranus. So it might have one last hurrah. So I think from this eclipse, advantage Kansas. The Capricorn ingress, which is when the sun moves into Capricorn, is still in play. It runs for 3 months. You can see in this ingress cast for Kansas, Saturn is right on the MC, which is usually an indicator of woe. This is the main reason I ranked Kansas City second below Buffalo, but that didn't turn out. Some challenges. Mars is rising, but it's more than 2 degrees away, so that's a negative. I would point out that Saturn is trying the progress sun of Patrick Mahomes, which is drawing a long bow, so it could turn out positive, but that's a big challenge for Kansas. The last one I'm going to look at is the new moon, which is still in play, which happened on the 22nd of January. The new moon was in Aquarius, 1 degrees Aquarius, widely conjunct Pluto and sextile Jupiter. You can see the new moon is on Andy Reid's Mars, and his Mars natally is sextile his Sun, so Pluto here is sextile his Sun at the time of this new moon. So, and if you remember, his progress sun is over here at 1 Gemini, so it's triggering that whole pattern there. If you're a Kansas fan, you want this new moon to still be working out, because that's pretty positive for Andy Reid, the Kansas coach. In summary here, the Frawley method to Kansas. The first games, I think Philadelphia looks slightly better. The coach, I like Andy Reid better. Quarterbacks, I think Jalen Hurts looks better. The solar eclipse, the advantage is to Philadelphia. The lunar eclipse, if it's still in operation, is an advantage to Kansas. The Capricorn ingress, I think Philadelphia looks better, especially because of that Saturn on MC in Kansas City. The new moon I give to Kansas. So you can see it's pretty even here in terms of the astrological influences. So I think the bookmakers have got this pretty right. Judging by the form of the last couple of weeks, you would either be looking at Philadelphia to blow out Kansas, Kansas keep it close, and have an opportunity at the end. So I'm going to lean quite heavily on the Frawley method for this one. I think Kansas City, if they can keep it close, have a shot right at the end there, maybe forcing overtime and getting the win. If you want to see some more, like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.